Okay, I'm starting the recording. So essentially the first slide is about why grammar is so important. So the grammar is the set of rules that we have and which govern the use of the language and therefore governs how we write. And it can be really challenging, particularly for native English speakers have more of an intuitive sense, and that will be the same in whatever your number one language is. And then for other speakers of English, it's a bit more challenging. And unfortunately, if there are even small errors in it, in the use of punctuation or grammar, then sometimes the writing wouldn't make sense. So I'm just going to go through some of the ones that we see the most often. So this is, and it may also help you correct some of your own writing, but then it also may lead you into thinking that perhaps you could possibly use a different set of grammar rules or a different way of working. So comparative. Yeah, comparative. We use comparative adjectives to compare two things or show change, and it depends on the number of syllables in the word. For example, old, then you've got the ER, older, safe, safer, and I'll show you the Padlet afterwards. Sorry, it keeps jumping. Yeah, so there you are. So an example here is the debt was more bigger than the credit. So it's actually should be the debt was greater than the credit. So using the word more isn't necessary here. And then if you look at underneath countable, non-countable, there were less cases of meningitis than last year. There were fewer cases of meningitis last year. So always try and pay attention when you're using the comparative. And then we move on to the second one. So this is punctuation. So I'm using little bits of odd grammar rules as they come up in students' assignments, and I've kind of made a note of them. So it's something. So often what is relevant for one person is relevant for a lot of people. So commas. The comma is the one punctuation aid that can really make a huge big difference to the type of writing you're using, particularly if you're using slightly more complex sentences. So using commas to divide items in a list. So usually you don't need to include a comma before the final item in the list. You'll use a word like and or instead. For example, now here's the example here. There are essays focused on healthcare, comma, therapy, nursing, and rehabilitation. So often students will put a comma after the nursing, but you don't have to. So the word and at the end replaces the comma. And then after your introductory phrases, so when you're writing a paragraph, when you're starting off with your topic sentence, you will more often than not use an introductory phrase. So an introductory word or phrase can signal continuation of a point, change the direction of a sentence, or emphasize an author. So, in addition, it is essential to drink plenty of water. So you'll see the comma there after in addition. Consequently, dehydration can be avoided. Therefore, it is important to be aware of the ambient temperature. So if you're looking at, and remember the word however, moreover, they have commas. So bear in mind using commas at the introduction. And this is the third, this one is really important because it is one really effective way of making sure that your sentences link to each other and that your paragraph, all the sentences within your paragraph have a good flow, meaning that the sentences are all joined up and it'll make a lot of sense. So using one word to represent a previous word or idea, often ambiguity arises, so be specific. So often we have a sentence and you use a pronoun in the following sentence to refer back to the idea in the first sentence. You have to be very specific because otherwise it's not always clear what it's referring back to. So, etc., etc. Impact of diesel use on air quality. This increases in rush hour. So this is the pronoun. So you have to look at the meaning afterwards. It is the inference here is the air quality increases in rush hour and is not the intended meaning. So it should be the diesel use. So impact of diesel use and air quality. This impact increases in rush hour. This is correct. So when you're referring back to an idea previously mentioned, you have the pronoun there, but you also can repeat the noun. So a good way of ensuring continuity in your work and continuity in your paragraphs is to repeat an idea or repeat an item of the previous sentence. So that makes the reader know exactly what they're reading, rather than having to second guess it. Okay, so pronouns. These are used to replace nouns, and a singular pronoun often causes confusion. So we have here anyone, anybody, anything, each, either, everybody, everyone, everything. You can see the list there. Neither, nobody, no one, nothing, somebody, someone, something, all take a singular verb. It does not take the plural. So look at the example here. Each of the new measures are to be introduced separately. The better version of that is each of the new measures is to be introduced separately. And I think that occurs because normally when you use these pronouns here, you are often referring to like a group of people or a number of people or a number of items. So therefore you would think that that is plural, and in actual fact it's not. So you're just using it as a singular reference. Okay, the function of the relative pronoun. So the function of relative pronoun is to head or introduce an adjective clause. An adjective clause follows the noun. So to identify it. So the man who won the lottery is outside. The adjective clause highlighted identifies the man to tell us something interesting about it. So if you use the relative pronoun there, who, that refers back to the man. So for example, Inspector Smith, who won the lottery, is outside. So the adjective clause tells us something interesting about Inspector Smith. So when you're doing your writing and you're introducing a concept or you're introducing an idea or a challenge or an issue, you have that clause there, and you can use the relative pronoun to refer back to it. It gives a little bit more explanation, and it brings a nice sentence, and it saves doing lots of different sentences. Okay, any questions on that so far? Was that any questions so far? Hi, the other two of you who've just joined. Any questions on that? Okay, so this is also okay. This is also really important, because if you're going from academic writing, has to be really specific, and everything has to be precise, and there's absolutely no ambiguity, because the work you're doing, particularly if you're at master's level, the work that you're doing, you're putting forward a case, or you're writing down discoveries, or you are introducing something. So the important thing is to be as specific as possible, particularly when you'll be using the work of other authors to support your judgment, to support your ideas. So you need to be able to put it over as correctly as possible. So when it says vague, that means you don't want to be at all vague, because otherwise you're unsure what you're referring to. So the pronoun he, this, or it should refer clearly to the noun it replaces. And if it's not completely clear, then that's where ambiguity occurs. If you put this handout in your binder, it may remind you of important tutoring strategies. Then you have to ask yourself, what does it refer to? Does it refer to the handout, or does it refer to the binder? And I think we covered this 2 slides ago. In some pronoun usage, the reference is implied but not stated. So particularly if you're referring to quite challenging concepts or new or investigative work, it's really good when you're referring back to something, you also repeat the noun, and we covered that 2 slides ago. So the school changed its mobile phone policy, which many students resisted. To improve the sentence, the writer needs to make explicit what the students resisted. So the students resisted the school mobile phone policy. So don't be afraid to really make absolutely clear what you're referring back to. And there's some examples there, and I'll make the screen a little bit bigger. So there's the man, the relative pronoun who stole your bike has been caught. his car, which is 2 days old, broke down again. So the relative clause here is not used as much, and I think it's because students are often unaware either where the comma goes or which pronoun to use. If you look at that first one there, the man, and then it would be comma, who stole your bike? That's describing. That's a descriptive phrase, has been caught. So comma after the man, comma after bike. So his car, comma, and then comma. Okay, so the possessive noun its. Now this is a common error here, and it's everybody gets this one wrong at some point. So as its aim, the book describes the whole problem. As its aim, the book describes the whole problem. So that is the correct one. That is possession, and it's the correct version. It's not a viable answer to the problem. It's not a viable answer to the problem. You can see there, I think it's there, yep. You can see there the apostrophe replaces the I. It is not a viable answer to the problem. So that's correct. It's not had a good review. And again, the apostrophe there replaces the I. It has. So that's the correct version. So make sure you know whether it's possessive or not. Okay, conjunctions. Conjunctions, joining words, and this is one of the one of the fifth aspects of grammar errors that really commonly occur. There's way more, but these are some of the common ones. So words such as but, because, and should join sentences and not start them. I think this is just it becomes colloquial English, and I think this is the way that when people are speaking, they're trying to write it down at the same time. So, hi, Friday, who just joined, or David, who just joined the session. So, because the sample was too small, the results were invalid. Okay, so don't begin your sentence with because. Since the sample was too small, the results were invalid. That's the correct version. And then again, don't begin your sentence with but the UN, the United Nations, failed to act, and the member states did nothing. So don't start the sentence with but or and. Okay, so if you reorganize the sentence structure, you'll see the country was attacked, comma, but the UN failed to act, and the member states did nothing. So often you can use the conjunctions to join up the ideas in a sentence, so that they can be well used. Just don't put them at the beginning. And then it also means you're avoiding very, very short sentences, which can often appear to be a little disjointed. Okay, and here's just a short thing on the use of prepositions, which can be I think prepositions in every language can be quite challenging, and for native English speakers, they're intuitive, mostly intuitive. And if you've had to learn English as a second language, it's not really intuitive, and you have to learn a whole set of grammar rules. So rewording your sentence provides a sense of formality and creates a better flowing sentence. They should not come at the end of the sentence. So in actual fact, if you put prepositions at the end of the sentence, that's a common error for everybody, for many students. These figures are the ones you will work with. So you've got the preposition going at the end there, which isn't the correct place for it. The correct version is these figures are the ones with which you will work. So putting prepositions at the end has become a little bit more of the accepted English. And it's in order to maintain your good academic register, you should integrate it within your sentence. So look, you'll see there, no is the incorrect one. The samples were incubated during 30 minutes. So that's a really common error there. The correct version is the samples were incubated for 30 minutes. And I think that error is quite common from right at the very start of learning English, or no matter how many years you've learnt English for. So the patient had been treated for us since 2 years. The correct one is the patient has been treated by us for 2 years. So since, you use since, and I'm sure you know this, you use since when you're referring back to a specific date. Participants were enrolled between January 2021 to May 2021. Nope. Participants were enrolled between January 21 and May 21. So you use the preposition and between the two time periods. This is also correct. Participants were enrolled from January 2021 to May 2021. Okay, now here are just, this is just a sample of some of the miscellaneous errors, because sometimes people put in the odd miscellaneous error. So these are just a collection of some of the most frequently occurring ones. So lots of people use spell checkers. So the good old AI. So while spelling checkers are useful, they have limitations, in part because they don't recognize homonyms. They are words that sound the same but spelled differently. So a good example of that is, yes, it says this at the bottom, there and there and there. The only way to catch these errors is to proofread carefully, preferably on printed paper. Now I know that's not always possible, and sometimes if you have the capacity and you have the time to be able to read your work from the end of the text, so read it backwards, end of the text right up to the start of the text. And in doing that, you often have a better idea of which words have been incorrectly spelt. So these are the ones to watch out for. It's possessive versus it is contraction. Your and you are. They're possessive and they are versus they're the place. So it's those three at the bottom. So this is and that's particularly in using the spell checker. That because they're all correct words, it just doesn't get picked up, and it depends on the context. Okay, singular brand names. A business is not they and is not plural. A business is a brand and is therefore it. So, for example, to deal with its rapid growth, Babcock Company needed to establish a common identity, a one business approach across divisions. Tesco is to provide support to local communities, and it's not Tesco's, and it's not Tesco's are. It is Tesco is. So the singular brands use this as singulars. So you'll be using company names and country names within your work. And I think I covered this briefly before. So words which are commonly confused are homophones. They finished their work before noon. We have 6 places at the conference. We'll go there. Research is a skill, but they're not highly paid. Okay, and these are the common misuse. So affect and effect. Affect to indicate influence. The medicine didn't affect her. So an effect is the impact, and it's the noun. Than, then. Use than for comparisons. John is much taller than his brother. Then means following. Which and which. Here, right here, and to hear somebody, the verb. Are, and I also think that when they're being spoken, they can sometimes sound quite similar. So if you're listening to them, it's very, and you're taking notes down, it's quite easy to get them mixed up. Are and our being the possessive. Buy, purchase something, and buy the preposition. Accept, to accept something, the verb, and accept. Weather, the weather, and weather. So there's actually weather and weather. There's actually no difference in the pronunciation there. There's difference in meaning and difference in spelling. Okay, this is, they're called, now you don't have to remember the grammatical term, but it's called the dangling modifier, and it's something I touched on at the beginning with pronouns. It's when the pronoun you use doesn't refer back to the idea or the concept you mentioned in the previous start of the sentence, or in the previous, the start of the sentence, or in the previous sentence. So this mistake happens when a descriptive phrase doesn't apply to the noun that immediately follows it. And you'll see the example there. After declining for months, the department tried a new tactic to increase sales. And then this is where I said you need to be really specific. What exactly is declining for months? The department, It's unclear. In reality, the sentence was trying to say that the sales was declining and not the department. So to fix the problem, try turning the sentence structure around, although beware of the passive voice. So the department tried a new tactic to increase sales after it had been declining for months. Okay, and I think sometimes common grammar errors are really easy to fall into the trap of grammar errors if the sentences aren't structured properly. So you can improve the sentence style, you can improve the way you write your sentences, and also that's really important when you are paraphrasing stuff. If you read an article, you've read an important paragraph from an article, and you're trying to put it into your own words, it's at this point that's really useful to have good sentence structure. So a compound sentence contains at least two independent clauses. These two independent clauses can be combined with a comma and a coordinating conjunction or with a semicolon. So these are really good. So often when I'm looking at work, I will say, join this up. And I think students are often unsure how to join them up. So, for example, the protocols for these determinations are lengthy, typically over 7 hours, and they require careful sample preparation. So you can see the use of the commas there and how important they are. Still talking about the same subject, but if you look at the comma there, and after 7 hours, it's making a lot more manageable, and it's splitting up the components of the sentence. Here are a few further examples. She completed her literature review, comma, and she created her reference list. He organized his sources by theme, semicolon, then he updated his reference list. The final one, they studied APA rules for many hours, comma, but they realized there was still much to learn. And that's it. So I will stop recording there.